Imagine being known as the genius that inspired A Game of Thrones, The Kingkiller Chronicles, Aragorn, and even being one of the main inspirations behind all of Brandon Sanderson's books, and also being relatively unknown. Well, the truth is, there's actually an author that is the inspiration behind all of these series and many more, and almost no one talks about him on BookTube anymore. Now, before I reveal who this author is, let's read some statements that other authors have given about this author. Neil Gaiman said that this author is one of the brightest and best, while George R. R. Martin literally said, "This author inspired me to write my own 7-book series. This series he's wrote is one of my all-time favorite series." Brandon Sanderson said, "This author is a master storyteller, and the Austen art books are his masterpiece." And lastly, Christopher Paolini, the author behind Aragon, he said, "Memory, Sorrow and Thorn is one of the greatest fantasy epics of all time." Now, if you know who created Austen art or Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, then you know that I'm talking about Tad Williams. Now, let me make it clear, this author here isn't like struggling with sales or anything. He's probably sold more than enough books to keep him alive for the rest of his life and stuff like that. But imagine being the author that literally inspired Kingkiller Chronicles, which has sold more than 10 million books, A Song of Ice and Fire, which has sold more than 100 million books, Aragorn, which has sold more than 50 million books, and then Brandon Sanderson, which has sold like 20 or 30 million books, and then you, being one of the main inspirations, are relatively unknown. That is just insane. Now, I have recently finished The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams, which is his first book in his most famous series called Memory, Sorrow and Thorn. And in this video, I want to talk about why is Tad Williams relatively unknown when he's had such a huge impact on the genre? Where can we see his inspiration in other books, especially A Song of Ice and Fire? And also, should you pick up this book? Alright, so let's get into it. Now, as I said, I've only read one book by Tad Williams, but I did do some research and I discovered that Tad Williams, he was just most likely a bit unlucky with his timing. If he had published The Dragonbone Chair maybe 3 or 4 years later, then I do think that it's much more likely that he wouldn't be a fantasy author that has done really well, but maybe he would have been one of the all-time greats and be compared to maybe, for example, Robin Hobb or even George R. R. Martin and so on. Because it just seems that he was a bit too early and maybe the fantasy genre wasn't really ready for an author like Tad Williams to come on the scene yet. But there is another thing about all of his books, and I've only read one book, but I did do some research, that is making it a bit challenging for contemporary fans to get into, and that is the length and especially the pacing. Now, Tad Williams, he is known as being an author that likes to take his time. And some people would even argue that most of his books could probably be shortened by 15 or 20%, but Tad Williams, he intentionally makes the books longer because he sees this as a trade-off. By making the book longer, he's able to flesh out the characters, the plot, and the world even more, but the consequence of that is that the pacing really suffers. And if you are a person that doesn't read that much, or if you're an impatient reader, then reading Tad Williams's books can be a real struggle because the books are massive. I mean, The Dragonbone Chair is 900 pages, book 2 in the series is also around that length, and then book 3 is literally like 1400 pages, and all of them are known for being very, very, very slow. But all those extra pages allows you to get so immersed in the world, and the payoff is incredible. Now, where can we see some of Tad Williams' inspiration? Now, I just want to especially highlight A Song of Ice and Fire because it is so clear, and as said George R. R. Martin, he mentions Tad Williams as one of the main inspirations behind A Song of Ice and Fire, and having read The Dragonbone Chair, I can definitely see the inspirations. Let's start with the most obvious one. The title, The Dragonbone Chair, literally is the Iron Throne in A Game of Thrones. In this book, we also have family members that hate each other and backstab each other and betray each other, similar to A Song of Ice and Fire. We also have a whole kingdom that is starting to break up because a certain king has passed away. And then also, similar to A Song of Ice and Fire, dragons are in this world, but they have not disappeared, but they're not as much in the forefront anymore, but they are starting to slowly come back. Do you see the similarities? Now, in a lot of ways, I think George R. R. Martin, he probably took this story in some aspects, improved upon it, like he made it a bit grimmer and also a bit more ruthless, and I also think the plot is a bit like complex in A Song of Ice and Fire, which makes it probably a bit of a more of a compelling read for the general audience. But having read this book, should you pick up The Dragonbone Chair? Now, let's discuss it. Let's start with the things that I loved. Now, Tad Williams, he is one of the most beautiful writers I've ever come across in the fantasy genre. I mean, his writing style is incredible. It's been a while since I felt so immersed in a world as in the Ocean art world. So if you are a fan of Robin Hobb, which is an author that Tad Williams so often gets compared to, then you need to read Memory, Sorrow and Thorn. I totally agree with the comparisons because there's so many different comparisons, both with the writing style and the pacing and the coming of age elements and so on and so on. It's absolutely brilliant. Now secondly, if you like a good slow burn, then this is the series for you. I mean, it is slow, but the payoff is incredible. Thirdly, if you enjoy well realized characters, then pick up this book. Fourthly, if you are also a fan of classic fantasy that has elements that feel modern, a bit like The Wheel of Time both can feel very classic but also has elements of more modern writing, then pick up this book. And then fifthly, if you are a fan of a complex plot where there's a lot of moving parts and we see this big kingdom slowly going towards a bigger war and the tension just very slowly increases, then this is a series for you because, as I said, the world building is incredible and the politics are so intricate and interesting. And also, I have to mention, sixthly, if you enjoy a good coming of age arc, then this is the series for you. It's been a while since I felt so immersed in a book. Literally from the first chapter I was already in love with Tad Williams' writing style. It is literally a chef's kiss and I literally did not mind that this book was 900 pages. To be honest, if this page was 2,000 pages, I probably would have read it all the way to the end because Tad Williams, he just has a way with words that makes you feel so immersed and it's so atmospheric and it's just beautiful. That is the word I want to use. It's just absolutely beautiful written. Now, as I've already mentioned, this is not going to be for everyone. Like, if you hate classic fantasy, you're probably going to hate this. If you hate slow burns, I mean, in some ways, this is slower than Robin Hobb, and Robin Hobb is a very slow-paced author. But the first 200 pages in this book, we do see some like elements of conflict in the background, but literally, first 200 pages, we just follow our protagonist Simon as he walks around the castle just talking to people. I mean, almost nothing happens in the first 200 pages, but I loved it so much because Tad Williams, he is an author that is able to make these scenes where almost nothing happens very, very enjoyable because you feel like you are there. Now, I also have to mention that occasionally some of the politics here can get a bit confusing. Like, we'll primarily follow our protagonist Simon, but every once in a while we'll get a character following some kings or royals somewhere far away, and you haven't really been introduced to who these people are and what they're talking about, and those chapters can be a bit confusing, but those are such a minor part of the story and it really didn't bother me, and also gives us a bit of insight what happens elsewhere in the kingdom. But yeah, Tad Williams, he is probably the author in BookTube that deserves more recognition, especially considering that he is the main inspirations behind almost all of the series that are popular on BookTube. So I would highly recommend, also after having read the first book, please pick up Tad Williams' books and the Dragonbound Chair, because this is gonna be in my top 10, maybe top 5 books of the year, and it's already an all-time favorite, and I absolutely can't wait to continue the series. Have you read Tad Williams? Which other series do you think I should pick up by him? Definitely let me know your thoughts, and thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Now, if you want to support what I do here, then I do have a Patreon. Now, a reason why I created a Patreon was to find a new way to reinvest to the channel, because basically since I created my Patreon, I spent around 100% of my earnings to hire an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month. Now, since creating my Patreon, an editor has done more than 20 videos for me on my channel, so it makes a huge difference. Now, if you join my Patreon, you will also get some benefits. For example, you'll get a name in my videos like these guys. You'll also be able to join the exclusive Viking book club where every month we read one book together, and you might be the one to put the book forward. This month we're reading this book, and next month we're reading this book. You also get to vote on my next read, get access to exclusive videos like a wrap-up or even book reviews, and so much more. But this is totally voluntary, but all support is much appreciated.